My eyes greeted an unfamiliar surrounding. I looked around. I was cold. My sleeping bag was gone, my tent was gone, lightning dawn and moon dust weren't there. Almost all my supplies were missing from my immediate person. All I had now was my hiking boots, blue jeans. I was wearing gloves along with a black shirt that had some poker cards on it. I was wearing a Calvin Klein jacket with wool inning. My wool gloves, luckily. A wool scarf and a flat cap. I was confused. I saw my pack. My hatchet, my crowbar, my machete were there, along with a newly acquired piece of equipment, a map. I went and looked at it. It was marked for me, and I had a compass. It told me the direction when I read it. It was the direction of a place called the Crystal Kingdom, or Crystal Empire. I picked up a note that was nearby. 20 minutes had passed, and I was beyond pissed. They betrayed me. I brought them in, gave them my food, willing to protect them, sheltered them. And what do? They steal most of my shit and dump me in a winter wasteland. Lightning dawn and moon dust they threw me out here to die. But if I was to live, they gave me a map. I had 3 days worth of food. 5 to 6 if I rationed. I had some water. I had means to start a fire. But that wasn't likely. I looked out ahead, knowing that the journey would be long and hard, knowing that this wouldn't be easy, that I'd have to trench and pray to God. And I mean I'd have to pray for a fucking miracle that I could make this journey. Judging from this was about 30 miles, maybe even 40. This isn't going to be easy. Well, maybe it was just 23, but I'm going to look at the positives. I have weapons, which means I have a means to protect myself. I don't know what to think of. Cameron was trudging through the thick snow as the snow from above pelted his body, only increasing his determination to push forward. He didn't want to die out here, for his form to fall weak and collapse into the snow and embrace a comforting sleep which he would never awake from. His determination and his hope were the things that were pushing him. His faith in his ability to survive was pushing him. He heard howling. He knew the wolves were out there. He knew there were wolves. Snow wolves. He didn't have a gun, but he had a machete. He had a hatchet and a crowbar. He'd most likely take the machete. The machete or the hatchet. Crowbar wouldn't suit in this situation. He'd rather slash one of them. There'd be a better chance to cut some muscle in the leg, cause them to limp and run away. He didn't want to use a crowbar, because he didn't want to use the extra effort and have to heave it and break a bone in one of their bodies. He'd rather have something he could swing with quick. A machete would do the job nicely. The reason he wasn't really... he was thinking about it, but he wasn't too keen on the hatchet. Because the hatchet had all the weight at the very top, which means it'd take him a few more seconds in order to bring it back to swing again. The machete wasn't like that. A blade was a blade, and this one was made to swing. It was made for cutting vines and other stuff. So it was made to swing fast, and made to pack the punch. If it came to the moment where he'd have to get into a confrontation, he would do what he had to do. By all means, he would try to avoid it. He didn't want it to harm anything, or kill anything for that matter. It wasn't in his nature, but it was in his nature to survive. It was basic human instinct. He was walking, looking down at his map, as the compass was pointing in the direction he needed to head, to the Crystal Empire. He was smiling. He'd gotten little information. And what was his information exactly? I'll tell you what he had gotten. The information had stated this and only this. The information he had gotten from Lightning Dawn and Moon Dust was that there were 3 different kinds of ponies. Earth ponies, Pegasi, and unicorns. He had learned that they had magical abilities, each unique. They controlled the weather, they had a celestial and lunar body that controlled the rising and the fall of the sun and moon. He didn't know what to believe. Frankly, he thought he was going nuts. I looked around, looking for anything, really. Landmark I could mark, just in case. Just anything, really, that could offer me some supplies, or fuck anything. A sign would be helpful. I was trudging. I couldn't help but feel grateful. I prayed for these last few days for God to guide me, and I felt that He was with me. Some people would call me a moron, but I didn't care. I felt that I had a chance. This was my chance to be alive. As I was walking, I saw something. I couldn't believe it. It was one of the many sentient species that lived in these lands. Multiple, actually. As I walked over, my face scrunched up. I looked and I was beyond disgusted. Apparently they were griffins. There was a lot of them. It seemed to have been a trade caravan, to the most of my knowledge. That's what it looked like to me. But it looked like whatever happened to them, most likely they got jumped by wolves. Outnumbered. From the pattern of paws that were coming from 3 separate directions, 3 packs had came in. They were swarmed and overwhelmed. As I looked around, I decided to check. Every single one of them I found were dead. It wasn't until I checked the carts to see for supplies. When I peeked my head in, my heart sank with surprise as I saw a little girl, what appeared to be a kid griffin, wrapped in blankets. There were tear stains on her eyes. I didn't know what to think. I was at a loss for words. This was another living, sentient, breathing, walking, talking species. Well, at least I presume it talks. Well, duh, they told me these beings talk, but this griffin is alive. I opened my bag. I didn't remember why my bag had wool innings. Why the inside were made of wool, a very warm one at that. It was probably warmer than my jacket. I picked up the kid, probably a few years older than a baby, and I put her inside of the bag, in my backpack, wrapping the blanket around to make it more warm. As I breathed, my air could be seen exiting my mouth from my lungs. As my lungs deflated, they re-inflated. As I began trudging through the snow. I had 2 separate necklaces. One had a flint and steel. The other one was a key. And the key said hope. I remember my coworker had given it to me as a gift. He told me that no matter what great pain I had, no matter what I went through, I would prevail in the end. I kept that with me my entire life. Not too far away, I saw a wolf. It was lying down. It had a spear rammed into it. Must have been one wolf from the caravan that didn't get lucky and didn't make it. I went to inspect it. Sure enough, it was dead. It was fresh, too. Probably only... Hell, it must have died an hour ago. I grabbed the wolf by his tail and dragged him. I looked around and I spotted a cave and made my way up there. As I made my way, I brought the dead wolf in checking the entire cave, making sure it was safe. Once I made sure it wasn't inhabited. I checked for many signs. No bones, no nothing. I went outside, dropping my bag gently, taking my hatchet and heaving at a tree, breaking off its limbs, then bringing them inside of the cave. I got a fire started. I had gut the wolf and yanked out its meat and began cooking it. Its innings were cooking. It made a pleasant aroma. I heard a small yawn from my bag. It was right next to me. I saw a little beak poke out. Then two gorgeous eyes. Eventually her head peeked out. She looked at me. Her body shook with fear, I could tell. She hid herself right back into my bag. I didn't want her to be scared of me. I had to think of something to say. I stared at her. She had yellow claws, along with gray fur. She had black wings and a black bushy tail. Now that I'm seeing things right, her claws were actually black. I thought maybe the lighting was off, but they're black. The front of where her fur is was white, with small black grayish droplets. She had gorgeous green eyes with a black beak, and at the end of each of her feathers, resembling hair, they were shaded black. I shook the bag a little bit. I used my Bowie knife to cut a piece of the meat off, as it was ready. When she poked her head out, I offered her a piece and said, "Eat this. You need to get your strength." We're going to be making a long trip. Before you object, you simply don't have a choice. I'm not going to allow you to just walk out there and risk your life out of ignorance. You're coming. Alright, I know that it's demanding. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to let you risk your life. She nudged, taking the piece of meat in her mouth, in her beak, and then slowly moving back into her bag, my bag, as I heard her eating it. I opened my canteen and began drinking some water, moving a small cup I had conveniently in my bag, pouring it in. Once she peeked her head out, I offered her. She nodded gently as I put it to her mouth and she began drinking. I then asked her, "What's your name?" She then looked at me and smiled and said, "Megan. Megan's my name." As I stared, I said, "Well, that's a very beautiful name." Eventually, I said, "Well, my name's Cameron. Nice to meet you." So, I decided not to bring up the topic about her parents. She seemed a little cold. The good thing was they had left me one of my sleeping bags. Just one. I sighed as I pulled her out of the backpack. She started kicking in protest, but I wrapped her in the blanket and put her in my sleeping bag. She looked at me with wide eyes and said, "But where are you going to sleep? It's going to get cold." I pulled my scarf up to my face more, to cover it to protect myself from the cold. As I began moving around the fire to make it last longer. It would last about a good 3 to 4 hours without intervention. I had done this many times, so I knew what I was doing. The way I arranged them and what I put into it made it that way. She then said, "But you'll freeze." I looked and told her, "I'll be fine. Trust me, my jacket will keep me protected." I pulled the bag close to me. The sleeping bag. I looked at her and said, "Look, Megan, I promise you, I'll get you to safety. I promise." She smiled and said, "I believe you." Once she closed her eyes, I stood there, messing with the fire a bit more with my machete, before laying my head back once she ate the rest of her meal. I had eaten the rest of it. What she hadn't ate, I wanted her to eat as much as possible, even if I had just gotten the scraps. I laid my head back and let myself fade out into a dream-filled sleep. I now had a responsibility. I promised to protect her. to get her through this harsh day, the harsh winter that surrounded us, that was filled with a danger not even, well, hell, most people wouldn't even survive. I would. If not me, then her. I'd get her to the Crystal Empire. I'd ensure that she'd live. If it was the last thing I'd do. My name is Cameron. And I pray that we'll make it. For the winter will only get worse.